Thank you. So, hello everyone. You all hear me well, I guess? All right. So I'm Malik, as Sergey said. I'm a performance engineer at Priceline. And I was not always a performance engineer at Priceline. I think that's a good win at Priceline. But um, what I do is it's pretty much software engineering, but I happen that I'm working a lot into trying to change the culture at the company with some other folks. And I'm also, as Sergey said, I am a Meet for Speed co-organizer. So thank you for a couple of you who've seen here. So let's dive in. Okay, so what's Priceline? For some of you that doesn't know, we're a travel website. We've been here since 1997. One of the tech bubble companies. So we've been through a lot of tech stacks, and culture been changing in the company. I guess I'm pretty young, so I was not there, but we heard a lot of good stories since then. Last year, we saved people $1 billion in savings, in travel savings. So that's kind of what we do. Try to kind of provide discounts, travel discounts to people. And today, I'll be talking about culture, but first of all, you all saw this hashtag, and since you're here, probably you care about performance. So as you know, perf matters, and performance is something that you always need to consider. And some of the good examples for that, that you probably saw before, like Google made a study, an increase in latency, or I think it was in their search results, 50 milliseconds it cost them 20% of their traffic. Amazon also did some studies before. And as Sergey said when he was presenting, he mentioned WP Stats. It's a great website where you can go and find a lot of studies out there about the benefits of performance in terms of business. Performance is also very important in terms of user experience. Some studies been made, and speed was ranked first in terms of user experience. So it's pretty important. It actually beats how attractive the site looks like. So really, users value performance in it. And I was just actually reading yesterday one other study I didn't include in the slides from Tamia Everest. And the study was actually comparing if the business impact if the site is down versus if the site is slow. So pretty much just very quickly, if you do the math, like a couple of minutes, if the website goes down, you kind of know directly how much that would cost the company. But if you do actually the math, if the website kind of is being slow over time, over a period of time, that actually the impact is much larger. So it was kind of mind-blowing. But today, I'm not going to be talking too much about if perf matters or not. I'm going to be talking more about culture and how to kind of maybe give you some insights about some of the stuff we've been doing and some of the stuff that I picked up, and that might help you at your organization. So I want to just a quick show of hand. Like, how many of you work at companies where like you need to have cultures? Good. How many of you work by yourself, like self-employed or consulting, freelance, or studying, or anything like that? Good. So this maybe help you a little bit if you find yourself, and I'm sure you work with other companies too, and maybe it would help you to see culture. Because culture is tricky. It's a very abstract subject. It's invisible sometimes. It's kind of hard to see it. But I would argue that it's not always the case if you know how to look at it, right? There's a couple of ways you could see culture, right? And a good way to look at this is like if you join a company, day one, and you really want to know if this company cares about a specific thing. It doesn't matter if it's performance, could be any other type of culture. You could look at this kind of stuff. You could know if actually people talk about performance, the company, if there's some tools around there that measure performance, if there's metrics and it's being evaluated, and if it's actually part of your job, right? Is it, or people just don't care about it and you just have other priorities. So why culture of performance matters, actually? So a couple of things. It's not, performance is a process. It's like security or accessibility or anything like that. It's not something you could just go and do it once and just call it a day, right? And in our industry, especially in e-commerce, you kind of see that a lot. You know, a lot of companies, they kind of keep shipping products, and then maybe during Black Friday, they just hire a consultant or whatever, and they just fix their website, you know, improve my website by 25%. And they think that they're done. But actually, it's not the case, because it's always changing. And the reason behind it, because the site always changes. Like, if you are an active website, not just like a side project or anything like that, you kind of have, you know, you always have features that are being shipped. So performance should be part of your process, right? It should be part of like your mindset. Like whenever you design anything, you should do that. And you've heard before, it's always not a priority, but actually it is, because it's actually accumulated and it becomes some technical debt. Another reason behind why performance culture matters, because you're always going to be getting more mobile users. And this is actually a good snapshot from Paul Calvano. Was presenting at this meetup, actually, a couple of months ago, about how much mobile users there are in the world. And mobile users are growing, and not only in the US. And I see that, you know, if you're a website that cares about growth, you know, you're going to get mobile users if you're based in the US or if you are going internationally. And you could see that internationally there is more mobile users than desktop users. Another argument is why, like usually, you're not testing like your real users, right? If you don't have great tooling about measuring and collecting data about your users, you always kind of like, whenever you build a website, you build it on this specific perspective, right? And performance culture and tooling helps you to kind of understand that fragmentation. Two last points. I would say performance is about quality as well. Again, if you join a new company, a company that cares about performance actually usually tends to build better products and better quality, so it kind of helps it to kind of start on a good foot. And a last point, which is like very general, I think performance culture drives innovation. And you kind of see that in some of the companies that actually drive in innovation. And a good example for this, I would say, is compression algorithms, right? If like the advancement in compression algorithm made us move from images to videos, and like it opened up new opportunities in building new kind of products. And one of the premise of VR, for example, I think it's not actually being democratized as these other technologies, because we're not there performance-wise. There's still a lot of issues with latency and things like that. So performance culture at Priceline. I think we're kind of lucky that we have some culture, and I'll touch on that why in a second. But in the past, we've been always saying, you know, whenever anything, we want to ship anything new, you know, this could be faster and everything like that, but nothing is done about it, right? It's not prioritized. And now, maybe we're on the process on getting to get people to just say, I can make this faster. I know how to do it. I can just get it done, and I know how to measure it, and I can understand it, and I just kind of get it done. So this is how actually usually the cycle of performance, right? You improve something, you get to regression, you go, you improve it again, it regresses. And a way to visualize this over time, this is actually one of the graphs from our pages, I think it was for Visual Ready, to show to measure visual ready over time. And if you want to put that same mindset about improvement and regression, it's kind of trivial, but it's usually actually represented about throughout like these different time frames, right? And you could see that there's some events that happened that caused that improvement or regression. And I believe that a performance culture is actually trying to reduce that time frame as much as it can, right? Like if you kind of don't have the right culture and you think that you have to improve it, sometimes stuff takes 6 months to be fixed. So how to create an effective performance culture? There's 3 things. I've been to the Chrome Dev Summit lately, and I really like the way they presented this, and for different vendors. There's 3 main things, right? There's organizational alignment. Really, like you need to have the buy-in from everyone. You need to know how to measure it, and you have the right tooling in place, and you need to approach the problem technically. Again, this is probably the technical part. That's probably the only technical part of this talk. If we want to dive in a little bit more, Meet for Speed, or there's a lot of resources out there, but I'm not going to be touching a lot of the technical stuff. So how do you get organizational alignment? This is one of the main issues that every company has. Like, how do you get people together? And that was a study made by Hetio. And this is something that I found out because we're kind of Priceline in the process to migrate to Kubernetes, like for our deployment orchestration, that most of the main issues to make a company make the move from this technology to the other one is to actually have some kind of alignment, right? And it's understandable. Like, we live in an era of microservices. Every team kind of owns their own services. Every team is kind of autonomous. Every team is moving in their own direction, and it's kind of hard to kind of get alignment over everyone. This is a good example from how we do it. For example, like we have the hotel services team that they kind of do their own stuff. You have the front-end UX, they do their own stuff. Maybe they have some infrastructure team, they do their own stuff. And it's always a challenge for everyone to kind of bring everyone together and align them on the same thing. So the best way to do that is to go and find allies, right? And I remember, like, when I started at Priceline, I was doing product development. I was a software engineer. I was just going through this sprint process. You get your features that you have to build, and there's always a moving train. And I've been to one of these meetups, and actually Sergey was actually doing his, at first, asking if anyone is hiring, anything like that. And there's some guy, in the back of the room. He was like, yeah, we're hiring, and we're looking for people. And Sergey was asking, what's the company? And the guy was like, Priceline. It turns out it was Tom. We didn't know each other. We were on the same meetup, right? So that's kind of like the main things. And I believe that, and then I get to meet Tom and like discover some of the work they've been doing. And Tom actually like gave a talk like 4 years ago about ROM and synthetic in here. And now like just like meeting each other and doing work together, I feel like you become like stronger because like you kind of unlock new parts of the company and you kind of be able to kind of spread the ideas, right, about performance. So a good way to look at this is like really performance is about starting a movement at your company. I don't know if you've seen this TED Talk about how to start a movement. You've seen that? Okay, from Derek Sivers. It's about this guy, and I think it was a San Francisco park. And he started dancing on the music by himself. And he started dancing like that, and then some other guy joined him, and they started dancing, and then it turns out to become like a park dance party, right? So that's not Tom, I guess. But really, like what I'm trying to tell you here is like you really need to create your tribe. You really need to go and like find your people, right? If you really care about performance, and I'm sure you are since you're here. One of the ways we did that, we started this initiative called the Performance Ambassador Group. And what it is, and I actually stole this from, there's this Spotify squad model where like Spotify explains the culture, and I kind of felt that we kind of have a similar culture. But the way it works usually in companies, you have on these columns, like you have every single team by themselves. They work on their stuff, and maybe like you kind of create these chapters where like people come join together on like a common cause around some certain technology, how to adapt React because we're an Angular company, or it could be anything, right? And the Performance Ambassador Group is we try to kind of bring up some representation from different teams, not only front end. We kind of meet like on a bi-weekly basis, and we have people from front end, from back end, some infrastructure, some SRE. And the idea is just like we get together and we just come and talk about this, we discuss performance-related topics and see of like what we could do next. Can we create action items from this? Could we just make a change? And the goal here is like to kind of try to make performance contagious. And that's probably the way to do it, I really think, because one person, and I kind of see that like when I transition from software engineer to performance engineer, the first thing you get is like people think that you're here to fix their performance issues, right? You're a performance engineer, you're gonna fix me my thing, right? And it's not the case. Like honestly, I can't do that, right? Because I need a lot of time to just go and read through your code. Maybe it's like a new library that I don't have an idea about. Maybe I know the team, right? But you're already ahead of like the features that you're building, and it would take a lot of time. So really, like, it needs to have, everyone is like a performance engineer in the company. One of the good case studies that we have is when we built our internal common components. And we have actually another Priceliner who's actually leading this initiative. And one day, like with some designers like came in and he was like, actually we need some consistency in our product. And at Priceline, we kind of have different products. We have hotels and flights and packages and rental cars. And all these different teams kind of do their own stuff separately, right? He did an audit, and like for just a simple red button, like we found out like a couple of dozen versions of that same button. And the reason behind it is like if you're asked to build that button, you kind of have to go and do it, and you really don't have enough visibility of what's going on else on the other part of the website. Right? So some people just came in together, and we decided to just, let's build something like fix this issue, and we're gonna agree how's this gonna be consumed. This has a specific API. This is how we're gonna push code to it. And we built up a design system and some other internal common components. And the great thing about it is like that came in as a community, right? We open sourced it. So people from different teams came in and start, putting their contribution on that project. And for a long time, it felt like if you're not just tasked to kind of work with this other team, part of your goal, now you find yourself like working with someone else from this other team, and like you're now learning about what they're doing, and you're figuring out that they're actually doing the same thing. But the good thing is like at the end, someone noticed that the bundle size got bigger of that specific library, right? And people start, contributing and trying to optimize that and reduce that bundle size. So my point here is like, really people, if you really want your website to be optimized, like really you need to understand that people need to understand like the actual code and the way how you do it in order to get it done. But I'm not saying like you have to have control. You have to have a community, right? You need to have everyone kind of goes on the same direction. But sometimes like some other people are gonna go and do their own thing. And it's fine, you should get that because that's actually driving innovation. You just probably as a culture, like you need to be able to have people to come and give back the feedback, right, to that main community to make that community grow. So tell me, what about business? Because we've talked a lot about like alignment in terms of engineering, right? Well, business, just send them WPO stats. Really, like I feel like it's not the hardest thing because there's a lot of studies that showed that performance actually causing business impacts. And I feel like if you just show them like you should actually talk their language, like show them in their like whatever, if their KPIs is in terms of dollars, just show them how performance, try to find a study that shows how performance affected conversion rates or anything like that, or any other KPIs. There's a lot of resources out there, like you just have to Google. But one of the other things like we try to do as part of the initiative is to create competitive benchmarks. This is one of the slides actually we right now show at our quarterly business review. And we kind of compare Priceline versus our competitors. Sorry I had to hide the logos here because it's kind of confidential. But really, like, if you can, just make that competitor logo bigger if they are better than you in terms of performance. It works, really. OK, so that's another thing that I've heard a lot. Performance is a feature. Like, performance is a feature. Performance is a feature. I really don't think so. Performance is not a feature. Performance is part of software DNA. Like, I feel like if you're building software, that's what makes you different from maybe use an existing tool, right? And just like use a vendor and like make a website, right? Like really, like that's part of the DNA. Like that, you have to always think about how can I make this better. You always have to think about how can I work within this constraint, and try to improve with whatever, I don't know, with my memory constraint or time constraint or anything like that. In reality, if that's the language that works, if you have to sell it as a feature, just still go ahead and just sell it as a feature, because it is a feature. And actually, we've seen that. And actually, one of the great things right now that we saw, like part of our product flow, right? Anything that goes as like a product feature is usually it's a feature, and it's obvious, right? It's like make this button blue instead of red, or anything like that. It's visual, and this is gonna improve conversion. Make performance like that. If I make this website 10% faster, I mean, be specific, in terms of visually complete or anything like that for US-based users, this gonna improve conversion by how much? And just run an experiment and show that it's actually, when there is improvement, it actually has an impact. So measurement. This is the second part of the talk, and before we touch the technical approach. So for measurement, I think it's very important to have, before having a performance culture, you need to have a culture of experimentation. And we're lucky, again, at Priceline, that we invested in this a lot, to have this mindset, to have people to go and think about data. Because performance, and I think that's one of the reasons performance is a little bit intimidating. It's a lot about data, and you have to look at this distribution, and like people are like, what's P95 and stuff like that. But try to do that. And it's a great thing that there is a huge trend right now in the industry, your big data and things like that. Like people are trying, like a lot of businesses are going to become data-driven. And use that as a platform to build up your performance culture. But then how to look for the right metric? That's one of the other questions that people always ask. I understand that, I call this metrics fatigue. I picked up some slides from like Web Performance Talks I found out there, and it's really like there's a lot of metrics out there, and it's very hard to navigate them. You kind of have to spend the time and do research to see like what really works for you. But keep in mind, user experience is a story. You're telling a story throughout when the user gets to your website, whatever you want them to do. And performance also is a story. Right? Executives usually like one metric. Try to actually fight to say that it's actually not one metric. I think that's why speed index become very popular lately, even though it's very well not understood, because it's like one metric and it's like it's gonna solve all the problems. But really, like, make the case that it's a story, if you agree. This is one of the ways we actually try to communicate metrics at Priceline. We have this other platform that is actually bigger than Performance Ambassador Group, which is a TSC, which kind of brings a lot of people from like even leadership and some other, like a wider audience. After a lot of discussion we did on the Performance Ambassador Group, we go in and dive in through all those metrics and kind of dissect them and see which one works with the tools we have and everything. We ended up settling on like these 5 core metrics. Why these 5? This seemed to be like the least to understand. Visually complete, it's when the page is complete. First interactive is when the page is first interactive. First pane, that's when we first see something on the screen. And for first pane and time to first interactive, we call them first impression metrics, because that's like the first impression you want to give to the user whenever they land on your website. And visual complete and time to interactive, that's kind of like when everything is done and the user is actually able to do things on the screen. And this is important to have this kind of flow, because a lot of websites right now, we're not in 1997 anymore. It's not just an HTML page that renders and that's it. You call it a day and you can use load time. Really, like, there is some progressive loading that's going on, and you kind of have to account for that, right? And we went and we communicated, and that's now like the new shared metrics that product understand, engineering understand, and this is like our high level. This is how we're gonna compare this homepage with this other homepage, with this listing page for this product, with this other listing product. So here, like, what I want to emphasize, like, you really need to define a common language that everyone understands. Don't get into like having people bring this visual complete using this tool and compared with all the visual complete, and like you get asked like, oh, why this tool doesn't match up or anything. No, we're gonna agree all on this common thing, and we're just gonna use it for benchmark for now. However, like, again, like, having like exploring other areas is always healthy. It's fine to get people to use custom metrics because these core metrics cannot cover everything. It's a way to generalize stuff. It's better to have one metric. But if you have an important thing, like for example, if you're a landing page, and the most important thing for you is to have a search form on the page, because that's how you're gonna get user, to go to the next step. Use user timing or use UX capture or use any other library that allow you to do that, and make that specific to your own product. What about during page, after page loading, right? That's one of a lot of times, like if you start doing any performance-related work, you kind of forget about it. It's always about page load, page load, page load. But usually right now, users, like web apps are very rich. There is a lot to do in them. And you really need to consider having a smooth experience, right? Like if a user clicks on something, just show them something within 200 milliseconds. I would say 100 milliseconds. But try to give them some quick feedback. Don't make the scrolling, junky and everything like that. And this is the only code snippet that I have in the slides. But you could do that in a quick way. Like if you really want to detect a bad experience on users, you could take any event that you have on the page and go and take the difference of that event if there's a lag. And if it's above 100 milliseconds, just report it to your analytics and to detect that there is some bad experience in that. And you could use a lot of other tooling for that. I left this link for the Google Web developers that explain this a little bit. Should I use ROM? Should I use synthetic? Well, a lot of people talked about this. I'm just going to go through this very quickly, but really each one of them serves a specific purpose, right? You really want to have ROM to understand your users, and you really need synthetic to do benchmarks and kind of like do some testing in like a more controlled environment. This is one of the slides um, that I like a lot, just because it shows the difference between ROM and synthetic and how they kind of complement each other. So this is how we kind of do it at Priceline. We use ROM if you want to benchmark pages internally. And the reason behind it, because we have that data, so we could just compare two pages, and it gives like a more granular and more accurate measurement. And if we want to compare against all the competitors, we could use synthetic for that. I kind of like the slides because it kind of shows a couple of things. We try to, after we set up these different metrics, we kind of built up dashboards for every page to actually show the page performance for the specific for that specific page using these different metrics. So you could see like we care about medians and P95, and we kind of set goals to kind of have these budgets to not exceed. And one of the important things is to have annotation, right, on these graphs. And the annotation for like events to know like what's happening on the page. And in this example, for example, like we have this annotation there, and if you hover on it, you would know that there is an A/B test that got turned on, and it actually affected, time to interactive. So this quickly, you could set up alerts on that, and this quickly, let you know that there is an issue that happened because of that, that change, and which metric it affected, and you can go quickly to try to fix it, pretty much. There is a lot of challenges measuring some of these metrics, especially if you want to go in the wrong direction. Here, like, this slide actually covers a lot of stuff, but the point is like there is a lot of mess in there. It's like some of the work that I'm doing right now is trying to make Visual Ready as accurate as possible. And there's different ways to measure it. I use Sonar from Catchpoint, kind of reports a different metric. We use Boomerang for ROM, tells you something else. So there is a lot of, if you're very specific to this, don't feel lonely that you kind of have to do a lot of work on that. Same thing for interactivity, right? There's a lot of metrics here for first interactive. Every tool kind of measures that differently. Every tool describes that differently. I think, and the way we settled down on doing right now, because we use Boomerang for ROM, we use input latency, so pretty much we kind of assume that first interactive is slow if the user start interacting with the page and the page doesn't respond within that time frame. We know that there's an issue with that, and we could go and fix it. Same thing with consistently interactive. There's a lot of different ways to look at it. Don't use DOM interactive on navigation time. It's kind of like you're using load time nowadays. But really spend the time to kind of go and understand each one of them and how the tools are measuring each one of them. In terms of statistics that you would want to use, you need to understand always that your site is not always performing the same for every user. And that's actually some of the illusions that synthetic sometimes give you, because it's very controlled environment. You have to go and see the distribution and understand that some of the users have good experience, some of them have bad experience, some of them actually have horrible experience, and you need to go and figure out if it's a very bad experience, or these people are actually on an elevator or anything like that, wondering why their website doesn't load. Technical approach. You kind of have to start small. Don't be ambitious, of course. But try baby steps if you really think that you can't have a lot of the change. And start by low-hanging fruits. Start by stuff that doesn't take you too much to implement, and just go and show the impact for that small thing, and then try to scale up more and more. A good example that one of the tests we did is when we had our redesign, some of the designers, I think, sent the new logo from Sketch to the developer, and the developer just put it out there. And then a couple of months later, we just discovered that the logo was not optimized. So the team went and like optimized the logo. It's pretty easy. You could just put it on like SVGO or something like that, and decide to A/B test that change, right? And the savings was only like 10 kilobytes. It's pretty small. Like you'd say, it's not gonna save anything. And it's actually affected performance and actually affected booking by hundreds of bookings a day, right? And I think the reason behind it because that logo exists on every page, so it affected the entire path and made the website a little bit faster, I guess. So these kind of changes are very small. Just like need to know that you have to take advantage of the impact to show that. Some other low-hanging fruits that I think it's easy to do is just to go and clean up your code. Just go do an audit of the code, see the libraries that you don't use, and just get rid of them. And that would reduce JS bundle size. We know that bundle size affects parsing time. Adi Osmani talked about this a lot. A lot of the companies had some stats about it. Another thing is like to change the priority of like the way you load your page. So if your app requires CSS and you load that at the end and it's blocking rendering, just put CSS on top and it's gonna make things faster. Or like if you have some infrastructure stuff, you use Nginx or anything like that, just enable gzip if you're not enabled that. Just small stuff. Some of the more advanced techniques are that we found. And here, advanced technique, what I'm saying is like after you go and build that thing together and you kind of have better expertise as a community in that thing, just go, and every language or every framework has the advanced section. Just go through the advanced section and try to apply those techniques, right? One of them, for example, for us, like since we migrate to React and Webpack, made it easy to go and do code splitting, right? And that reduced the bundle size by a lot and makes the website faster. And you can go and now and just do some smart stuff about it. Some example here, like I'm showing how you could load the maps. We're not loading the map whenever you load the page. We just load it only if you hover on the page, and that fetches the JavaScript and load that. You can go and explore like intelligent caching techniques, try to change your TTLs and get things going. Another important thing is like you really need to educate people. Like people would not know how to do it if they are not getting the right trainings and education, right? Of course, education internally, but also like company-wide. And this is a good example. We had Tim Kadlec on site, and he came in for 2 days and we did the crash course about how you optimize your website. And people now are happy. Like before, you're just very intimidated using like the performance profiling tool, and now you just like play with it, and and we hear like every day different teams like discover something in their like path that they could optimize. Of course, document every time you find a great optimization that works with your company. Not only like just share a link to whatever Google developers' website, but just document the optimizations that you think that worked for your actually company, right, or your website. And one of the extra things we did is like since we went through that effort, now we know how much it's gonna take. So we kind of classified optimizations by effort. So like this is gonna take me 1 or 2 or 3, and now product manager can go through the different optimizations and like they could, know which one they could apply within their time frame, right? Other things like we provide tooling and the way you measure it, trying to kind of simplify the process and make it easier for other teams to pick up whatever they've done before. And finally, celebrate. Sorry, I had to blur up this thing, but really celebrate. Like if they have any optimization that worked, just go and share it with everyone, right? And let people that it's actually working, and that kind of builds up the enthusiasm in the company and like build up the momentum to keep going. Quickly, like what are we gonna do next for us is we're spending a lot of our effort trying to automate some of the process that we've done, try to integrate some of these learnings throughout CI/CD. This is something we kind of decide on doing before. We didn't want to just start having like hard gates on like the way you ship code, because we didn't have a lot of pushback to kind of like get people on the same page, and then put up like soft gates and then like promote it to like hard gates to make your like CI/CD pipeline accepts or approve any change that would affect performance. That's it. Just as a final thought, just if you're just getting started doing culture, a performance culture, just start small. Always try to show the impact and measure, of course. That's it. Perf culture matters. Yeah. Questions?
I was wondering about the experimentation you may have done on various technologies like HTTP2, if you looked at that, and also now that Microsoft basically kind of conceded to the V8 engine coming up, whether I've read somewhere, I don't know forget which site, that are saying, look, we just took out the whole React thing from the beginning and we load with just native JavaScript, and that seems to do a lot faster for us. And then we load React after the first page just to get that initial speed bump. So I was wondering, experiments like that, if you've tried it and see, what your impact is.
Yeah, sure. Go over it.
So we did a bunch of synthetic testing with and without HTTP2, where we set up essentially a caching proxy for our site, and ran it with HTTP2 on and then off, and we saw really nice improvements there. We were really excited about measuring the difference when we turned on HTTP2 for our customers, because that's something that's a little hard to A/B test, because it's an infrastructure thing, and you're doing that negotiation before you really get a chance to decide who the user is and what they're doing and so forth. There's a bit of a story. We were planning out how we were going to measure the impact when we turned on HTTP2, and it got turned on before we had the measurements ready. We're running H2 and very happy with it, and essentially all of our user traffic is there. We know it's faster. We don't know exactly how fast, and we didn't get a chance to do a business measurement just because of the infrastructure layer that affects that. Same thing we're actually working on right now is changing the TCP congestion window. It's exactly the same problem, because you're changing something in a TCP stack that's happening before you have a chance to understand who the user is as to whether or not they should be participating in a test variant. But we're going to play some games with our Fastly CDN nodes and change the congestion window on some nodes and others, and see if we can see a difference there.
Next presentation.
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah.
There's a lot of technical stuff we didn't cover here. It's more about culture, but
I want to add one point to your presentation too.
Sure, go for it.
Changing culture can be a long game.
Yeah, I want to say that. Like, Tom have been doing some of the work for a very long time, right? And it's, back to the guy who's dancing, right? You probably start alone and then maybe get some other people. And it's actually a very slow process, but like, try to kind of focus on the opportunity at the end, and you're gonna get it done at some point, right? I mean, you're not gonna get it done because it's a process, but you're gonna get at least some level of culture that you're very comfortable with, and you will see that. I mean, your company will be successful, I guess.
Yeah, I think 6 years ago I had performance in my job title for the first time. About a year ago, I got to open a position for a performance engineer and hired Malik away from one of our product teams.
Right.
Has it been a year yet? I don't know.
Almost.
But it took a while to kind of work through the organization and get to the point now. I was at a quarterly business review last week, and the CEO was asking, how will that affect in performance, when the product teams were talking about features they're getting ready to release. So, you know, it's really come a long way, but, you know, we now have that sponsorship from that level too.
Right. I mean, the other thing that I want to say is like, so Tom was kind of maintaining Boomerang, which is a ROM solution. And within my product team, I was running a small script. But I was definitely seeing that it was not going to lead to a lot of, you know, it's not going to lead to something very serious just because of the amount of work. And just the fact that now you're able to build up a certain small group, you know, you promote Boomerang much more, and now like everyone kind of knows it, and you can use it to build, use it as a platform to build other stuff.
I have a question. Actually, two questions. I'll start with one of them.
Sure.
And I apologize, Malik. Tom might again start answering that one. How do you? So you mentioned that measure so you can prove the impact. So how do you sell the budget for measurement project itself before you measure?
If you don't have any measurement?
Yes, if you don't have any measurement, how would you do that?
First of all, you probably have some business measurement, right? At some point, I assume. You have something that you're optimizing for, business-wise. Could be a number of dollars to keep the lights on, or could be growth, like number of users or user retention, right? It could be any other things, right? I think if you start by having small improvement and you could measure that, there's a lot of tools out there you could use. I mean, that are free or have free trials. And you kind of get the impact for that and try at least to correlate it with these business metrics, even though you don't have the right infrastructure to just go and prove causality or anything like that. Try to correlate it. I think that's the first good step. Is that convincing?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. You don't have to like have exact proof, mathematical proof.
Right. Yeah. Don't overcomplicate it.
And that's what leads to my second question. And you know this question because we had this discussion at Meet for Speed last week. Do we have to measure in order for people know that performance improvements need to happen? Or is it good to have and performance culture can drive optimization on its own without the proof of success mathematical or maybe like measurement-wise? You know? Because we all know faster is better. Why do we need a number to remind us every time?
First of all, to detect the change. Like you would want to measure, like again, back to your first question. It's like just running a benchmark makes you, and figuring out that your website is not fast enough, right? And usually because you don't have the right culture. I mean, that's a theory. I think worth proving. But you could run synthetic and have a benchmark, and it's easy to know that you're actually not doing well, right? Just having that and bring that up and just say that we're actually very slow, plus all the other studies you could have, could be a good first step to actually try to get buy-in to do the measurement, to invest in measurement and to keep measuring. Because you can't improve something if you don't measure it, right? You can just, and that's one of the problems we had at first. Like we've done a lot of optimizations that we never thought about measuring. Like we probably measured it performance-wise. We know that it's improved performance synthetically, but we were not able to show the impacts tying it up to business data. And that's actually I think the tipping point that actually shake things up a little bit more.
So the key word is to get buy-in, you need to measure, and after you measure, you get buy-in, and then the culture creates itself.
Yeah, that's snowball effect.
Yeah, engineers like numbers, and business people like some of them too, so yeah.
So I noticed you use a few different tools to measure different parts of the load. Do you funnel all those stats into one dashboard that can be viewed simultaneously, or are engineers encouraged to go into different tools? And
So we primarily use Boomerang for ROM, and part of performance engineering, we kind of maintain that, like the flow, because we send that to a beacon, and it goes back to our data warehousing and things like that. So we kind of own that part a little bit. For synthetic, we Sketchpoint mainly, and we created template dashboards for different, like the critical paths, and it's good actually, even for me, to kind of have a like high view, like a bird view kind of thing of what's going on in these different products. But really, you're encouraged to use these other toolings like Lighthouse or Web Page Test or anything like that. But don't use it as a way to report back the improvement. You could report it as a side thing, right? And another point of that, like we're actually in the process of trying to include these other toolings too, because I think they have a lot of values. Like they offer a lot of interesting things that we can take advantage of. One of the things I think is it shows you your Lighthouse, for example, right now, like shows you what's your issues, and you can go and fix them, and they have like links to like documentation. I think that's pretty good for someone who doesn't know what's going on, right? Thank you.